Hi, you've heard it said something like, or you hear this from young people too. If you don't have kids before you die, you'll never have a chance to have children again in heaven. So I want to make sure I have kids before Jesus comes. I want to tell you that the verses commonly used to suggest that, we're going to go ahead and do this with that. Okay, where do people get this idea? The same day came to him the Sadducees, which say that there's no resurrection. They didn't believe in the physical resurrection. And asked him to Jesus, saying, Master, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren. Sorry, there's background noise. There were 7 brothers, and the first, when he was married, when he had married a wife, he died, and having no issue, left his wife to his brother. Hopefully the background noise isn't too much. No, there were 7 brethren, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife to the next brother, all the way down to the 7th. And the last of all, the woman died. So they all died, no children. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7 brothers? For they all had her. Would it be the first brother, maybe? Or would it be the last brother that was with her? Whose could she be? This is like a trap, right? It's like they think this proves there's no resurrection because it wouldn't make any sense according to this custom. And Jesus said, you err, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of heaven and God, or they as the angels of God in heaven. Notice, in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have you not read that which is spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And then multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his doctrine. They silenced him. So this is commonly understood, I think, mainly because people don't understand what happens after you die. It plays into this to make it more confusing. But I've heard even people who understand it like the right way still think that. Well, let me just say, heaven is not the final place for humanity. And notice it says in heaven. God's angels in heaven don't procreate because there's no need to. But man, made for the earth, was created to be their own creators, have children, and multiply, be fruitful, grow the love, grow the family. Well, so during the time being in heaven, you don't have children. That's what he's saying. But heaven is not the eternal estate. The new heavens and the new earth are the eternal estate. So there's nothing about this verse actually, unless you're convinced it's permanently our abode after death, which is not true. Then this verse says nothing about whether or not you have children in the eternal estate or after the last days or after the millennium. So this verse also suggests to me, when is the resurrection? It's at the beginning of the millennium. What do you know what that suggests is, during the millennium, the saints are in heaven. Because it's that we know that, let's see, I'll go to Revelation 20 first, I guess. We know that we get a timeline in Revelation 20 for the millennium. So what happens? Notice at the beginning of the 1,000 years, we see that the saints, okay, and I saw thrones and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God. Those didn't worship the beast. So everybody that was taken in the first resurrection, right? The dead in Christ and those who are alive and remain that didn't take the mark of the beast are raptured to heaven. And that marks the beginning of the 1,000 years. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead, the evil people that weren't saved, did not live again till the 1,000 years were done. This is the first resurrection. That is the ones he'd just been talking about. That was like an interjection to talk about the rest of the dead at the end of the 1,000 years. But these ones who reigned with him that didn't receive the mark of the beast, that were taken to heaven at the rapture, is the first resurrection, the resurrection of the just. Some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt. There's two groups. You can try to split that or join them, but Revelation 20 clearly says to be a splitter. Yes, at the end of the age, all will be raised, but it's the righteous at the beginning and the wicked at the end. Blessed and holy is he that takes part in the first resurrection. The second death has no power on them. So all those that are raised in the second dead, when the sea gives up the dead, those are the ones that are judged, and the sentence is executed at the end of the 1,000 years, after they when they were gathered by Satan and attacked the holy city. And that's what it says next in verse 7. When the 1,000 years are expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison. That is, I would say he's stuck on the earth, because all the people that are his people were killed with the Antichrist, whom Christ will destroy with the breath of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. They're all killed, and Jesus raptures through the resurrection, and with those who are alive and remain that didn't take the mark, to heaven. Well, this verse tells you they don't come back until the end of the 1,000 years, which we'll get to, but Satan's loosed out of the prison. That is, he's stuck on the earth. The bottomless pit is the earth that was destroyed at Christ's coming when he resurrects the saints, and then has these, in I think Mark 13, the parable of the sower, he sends forth his angels to gather up that to be burned, and then he takes away the wicked, so that all that remains are the righteous, and those are taken to heaven with those who are resurrected in 1 Thessalonians 4. So now it says, when the 1,000 years are over, Satan is loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations. Who are the nations? They're clearly the ones that are resurrected to be judged. So he's let out of his prison because now his people are resurrected again at the end of the 1,000 years, which it'll show here in a moment. They went up so he gathers them from the four corners of the earth, because they're all raised back up again. And he tells them the holy city comes down out of heaven. So it says, and they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints, the beloved city, the new Jerusalem. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them, the devil and his people who are encompassing the holy city. And they're burned in the fire where the beast and the false prophet are, on the surface of the earth, where they were killed at the first coming of Christ, who he destroyed with the brightness of his coming. And all those who took the mark of the beast, they're killed. Now they're back alive again. That's why it's saying the fire rains down, where the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So this is a reverse. It's like a chiasm here. It's like kind of going in reverse here, explaining how it's explaining it. I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and the death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. Those that hadn't had death removed, the sting of death removed at the first coming, they're raised, but they're facing judgment and execution of their sentence, because their names weren't found written in the book of life, but in the books their deeds were recorded that show them to be lost. And they were judged, every man according to their works, because they didn't have a mediator. Death and hell itself are cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. This is the destruction of the wicked and Satan and all things that don't belong in God's eternal kingdom. whoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. That would be all those who didn't come up in the first resurrection. And here's the kicker. After that's all done, the 1,000 years are through, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. So they've come back to the earth. Saw the holy city coming down out of heaven, like a bride, or like a bride adorned for the husbandman. That's when the saints come back from being taken to heaven. The end of the 1,000 years. The holy city comes down and comes down on Jerusalem. The one in heaven comes down to the one where Jerusalem is when it splits and it comes down. And then that's the city that they're surrounding, the evil people with Satan, which is demonstrating their wickedness. That's when fire comes down and destroys them. God removes them. And so now we have a new heavens and a new earth, which is the eternal abode for the saints for eternity. It's a new heaven and a new earth. They just came down back to the earth where Satan was held, and all the dead wicked were raised out of, the sea gives up the dead, and they're judged. The judgment that the saints were doing on the thrones with Christ, judging with Christ, was looking at the books. So when the destruction comes upon them, they have full knowledge of why these people are being judged. God literally shows the saints why his decisions are just. That's what they're doing for the 1,000 years in heaven. And yes, you won't be having children in heaven. You'll be carefully judging, looking at the books. And then that's the end of the age. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. It's on the earth. He will dwell with them. They shall be his people. Men were made for the earth. This is the new heavens and the new earth. And now it's Eden restored. And what did God say to do in Eden? To be fruitful and multiply. Now, it doesn't say that we'll have kids, but I'm just demonstrating that verse doesn't say anything about whether or not people can have children in the eternal estate and the restored Eden and the restored heavens and earth, the new heavens and the new earth, the eternal abode, everything restored how God had initially intended it. So there's only positive reasons to think it would be just as originally intended, to be fruitful and multiply, because the eternal state is on a new heavens and a new earth, a restored or recreated universe. There's different views on that. And is what confuses that. You can still understand this if you think you go to heaven when you die, of course, but I don't see how you'd go to heaven before the judgment has been commenced, which is what Jesus brings the sentence that is coming. In Revelation 14, there's a final message to the earth before Jesus returns to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the final message, the everlasting gospel. But then it says Jesus, he who is filthy, let him be filthy still, who is righteous. So it's saying, and then it said, Jesus says, behold, I'm coming quickly. That is, it'll happen fast, not that he's coming quickly in the first century. It's saying when he comes after the judgment has been finalized, meaning God's the one who decides, who's saved or not, obviously. The sense that we judge is simply, it means he's showing us his judgments so that we understand them during the millennium in heaven. That's what the verse says. The new city, the city where Christ takes us, his Father's house, comes down at the end of the 1,000 years with the saints in it, back to the earth. There are no other verses that say anything different. It's just, anything else is just things people force on the text. If you just take what the text says, that's the only text we have after the saints are raptured where we see them coming back to the earth at the end of the 1,000 years. There is no millennium on earth. There is no kingdom of whatever people say during the millennium. If you just take the text for what it says, it's all wrapped up at the end of the 1,000 years when the wicked are judged. Death is the last enemy. Death itself is then destroyed because the only ones left are the ones who receive their glorified bodies at the beginning of the 1,000 years. All the wicked are raised in their mortal bodies, and they try to attack the city with Satan. That's when Satan is thrown into a lake of fire on the surface of the earth. the rest of the Bible is, as far as the timeline, is the new heavens and new earth, which is prophesied from Isaiah 65 and 66 and other places. So there's no reason to actually think you can't have children after you go to heaven. Going to heaven really only happens when Christ gathers all the resurrected dead of the righteous, and he gathers those who are alive and remain, are gathered together to meet the Lord in the air. All the saints of all time go with Christ when he's at his return. That was his promise. I'm coming back. What is blessed hope? The return of Christ and the resurrection from the dead. Then we who are alive and remain will be gathered together with them who have fallen asleep. Then we will be with the Lord. So everybody's reunited together when Christ returns and raises the dead. And there'll be some who are alive at that time. And then at the end of the 1,000 years, come back to the earth. The new Jerusalem comes down out of heaven, where Christ will rule from Jerusalem on forever on earth, recreated. So there's no reason to think you couldn't have children then. There's nothing in the text that suggests otherwise. You just won't have children during the millennium in heaven. But even if I'm wrong about the timeline and all that, even though it's what it says, it's still just talking about in heaven. And even if you don't buy the way I explained it, it's still true that if you go to heaven when you die, that you'd only be in there until the end of the millennium. And then it comes back to the earth and God makes a new heavens and a new earth. So there you have it. There's no reason to think you can't have kids after in the eternal estate. So no, don't worry about it. I mean, by all means, have kids now if you want, but there is no reason that verse in Matthew 22 means that you'll never have kids again, or that there's never a purpose for children. Jesus made us to multiply. He made humans in his image to have a bigger family. Why would he make it so he didn't have any more after that? It's ridiculous. Of course we'll have kids in heaven. I don't see any reason to think otherwise. So, and the beautiful thing about the way I explained it is that if you lost a child, a baby, you'll be reunited with your child, either at the beginning of the millennium or at the beginning of at the end of the 1,000 years into the eternal estate on a new heavens and new earth. You get to raise that baby because it was put on pause until the resurrection from the dead. It won't grow in its spirit body for 1,000 years and then you'll meet it in heaven when you die. No, you raise your kids. They're sleeping. But Jesus goes to wake them. That's the blessed hope. Christ the first fruits, and those that are his at his coming. Jesus died for you. Death is now just asleep because he holds the keys to Hades, and he is the resurrection and the life. Death is real. It's the last enemy. You're mortal, and the gift of God is eternal life, and that's granted when he wakes you.
I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.